A year after TMNT 2, the arcade game, was released on the NES, a follow-up graced the console under Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3: The Manhattan Project. Now, unlike the last game, which was a port of the hit arcade beat-em-up, this was a completely original game. Konami was killing it with these licensed properties. Both them and Konami were known as the go-to companies for creating memorable licensed video game masterpieces. This was probably the first TMNT game I've ever owned as a kid, as far as I recall. The original game and TMNT 2 were games I've always rented or played at a friend's house until I bought sometime during high school. Now, you could argue whether this game was made either due to the second game being a success or the TMNT being popular at the time that a new game was inevitable. Either way, it still happened. A new TMNT game, who cared back then? Well, now that I think about it, the second game had to be a hit in some capacity since this game retains the beat 'em up genre from the previous game. So the plot for this game is the turtles are relaxing at the beach and decided to watch April's broadcast when all of a sudden Shredder interrupts, turns Manhattan into Floating Island before Floating Island, and kidnaps April. And the turtles set out to stop him. Again. A little bit more effort into the story this time around, even if it's still as simplistic as ever. The 90s. Now before you start the game, there are 3 options instead of 2. While there is a standard single player mode, there are 2 different choices for 2 player modes. 2 Turtles A and 2 Turtles B. Mode A allows you to hurt your buddy, aka Friendly Fire, aka Dick Mode, and Mode B where you cannot hurt each other. The gameplay expands upon what the arcade game established. For the controls, you press A to jump and B to attack. You press A and B to jump and kick from the air. New to this game is the ability to flip enemies. Pressing down and B allows you to toss enemies over you, which takes them out in one hit. If another foe happens to be behind you, toss the one in front of you to hit them and knock them out. This only works for foot soldiers, so using it on another enemy is no different than a normal hit. While the turtles are still palette swaps, this game does a good job distinguishing them a bit more. Raph, for example, he doesn't swing his weapon around like his brothers, he just pokes at them. I like when the turtles use their weapons, they have different sound effects. The biggest addition to the turtles is that each of them have their own signature move. It KOs most enemies and does more damage to bosses. At least I think it does more damage to bosses. Leonardo performs the tornado spin where he spins around with his swords. Raphael has the air drill where he spin drills at his enemies. Michelangelo has the kangaroo kick where he jump kicks his enemies, launching himself in the air. And finally, Donatello has the flip switch where he flip rolls in the air and finishes off landing with a downward bow attack. Now there are downsides to using them, the major one being that they drain a piece of your health. You also want to be aware of your surroundings before you perform them, particularly with Michelangelo. Using his signature move around a pit, while it won't kill you, it will cost you some pieces of your health. Leo's by far is the safest to use as he just stays put. Now this is purely subjective, but if you're new to Ninja Turtle games or beat 'em ups in general, I highly recommend using Leonardo. He's the most balanced out of his brothers. His reach may not be as long as Donatello's, but he's also not short range like Mikey or Raph. Whichever turtle you pick, use your signature moves sparingly. These days I save them for bosses and use them for certain resorts. As with the previous TMNT games, pizza restores you to full health. Unfortunately, this item is still pretty scarce. There's a lot of levels that will give you a hard time to the point where you'll be wishing for a slice the moment you're at low health. Now, unlike the last game, if you lose a life, you can switch between the turtles. Without a doubt, this is a great feature because it gives the player more choice to have fun and play around with each turtle. You may have a favorite Ninja Turtle, but once in a while you just want to play as the others. Now compared to the last game, you have a lot more enemies to fight this time around. Your main foe is still the foot soldiers, of course, but there's a lot more variants. You have your standard purple foot soldiers that throw sand in your eyes, foot that throws shurikens which you can reflect by hitting them, foot with boomerangs, foot with anvils, foot that try to jump you. So many variety of foot soldiers that come in different colors. Makes you wonder why they never came up with the idea of different colored foot soldiers in the cartoon. Mousers are back and are just as pesky as ever. New to this game are Krang's rock soldiers from Dimension X that wield projectiles. I would recommend you attack from a distance. Long-range weapon attacks will work for some of them, though your safest bet is jump kicking the ones with guns and jumping away as they'll immediately try shooting at you, particularly the Lieutenant Grenadiers. You also fight different forms of robots, even ones that look slightly like the Fugitoid from the original comics. I find these enemies some of the most annoying. They try rapidly shooting at you, never giving you the chance to attack. They ain't Contra, but they are trigger happy. So in terms of its difficulty, I would say that this game is probably the hardest TMNT game on the NES, but I think it's fair in challenge. The foot soldiers are slightly easier to avoid than in TMNT 2, though they can still be unpredictable if you try to kick them from the air, as they could still repel you. The new enemies honestly gave me more trouble than any of the foot. Now when I say there's a bigger variety of enemies in this game, that includes the bosses as well. I found them more or less as difficult as TMNT 2, personally. You'll likely get hit by the earlier bosses, but I still found them pretty easy. It's the later bosses that you have to worry about. Some of them have a pattern that you can use to your advantage. For example, with Bebop, you just have to wait for him to throw his ball and chain before you attack him, but you have to move quickly as he'll kick you right away. Trust me, I know beat 'em up games can lead a player to be head on, but it takes the right amount of patience and learning the boss's patterns to ensure a victory. Rocksteady and Bebop return, as well as new rogues such as Ground Chuck and Dirtbag from the original cartoon, as well as Toka and Razor from The Secret of the Ooze. The first 4 bosses were the easiest ones to deal with, though Ground Chuck, Bebop, and Dirtbag you'll have an easier time adapting to their strategies. Probably when you get to around Leatherhead or Razor, that's when the bosses start getting annoying. Occasionally you'll get mini bosses such as Slash and the Mother Mouser. You definitely want to have the right amount of lives when you face off against Krang and Super Shredder, cause, oh boy, they're a pain. Krang splits apart as he tries to hit you with a mallet, and Super Shredder just has an annoying electric attack that's hard to avoid. He also has a demutation attack, but thankfully, unlike the second game, it doesn't take your full health away. Presentation wise, it's a major step up over the last game. The last game looked good too, but this looks way better. The level design pushes the NES's graphical hardware to, in my opinion, some of its best. The stages look amazing for what the system could do. Your first stage is a beach shore level with a very pleasing aesthetic. Just the amount of detail put into these stages. TMNT games are some of the biggest examples of what the system's capabilities can do. The music for this game once again kicks shell. I'll try to explain it as best as I can, but when listening to the music, it feels like nearly all of these tracks not only sound, but also make you feel like you're playing either on a beach or as if you're taking a vacation in New York. It feels like a vacation video game. Well, at least for someone who doesn't live in New York. Maybe part of this feeling was a nostalgic moment I had when I played this game at a young age while visiting my cousins in New York. I think it was because of them that I learned about the Konami code. You can tell that this game has a lot of sentimental value to me since I was a child. But that's why I'm reviewing this game. It's not just for the fun of reviewing it, it's because it's just so much fun. Does Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3: The Manhattan Project deliver as a much better experience than its predecessor? Of course it does. You can switch between the turtles if you lose a life, which is way better than the second game where you have to stick to one turtle. They each have their own special techniques, there's more enemy variety, the levels look great, more classic villains. If I could only recommend one TMNT game on the NES, it would be this game. Especially when playing this game with 2 players, the game's a great time through and through. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Now go out and get yourselves a slice of pizza. Hi guys, quick little edit. So I saw that Konami did the unthinkable and announced TMNT the Cowabunga collection. When I was watching this on the State of Play, I'll admit I did not expect something like this to happen. But this will include all 13 of the old school Ninja Turtle games, including both the arcade and NES port of the arcade game, the arcade and Super Nintendo versions of Turtles in Time, and all 3 versions of Tournament Fighters. I believe I read somewhere that 2 or 4 of these games will have online support, which if it does, that's huge. It's scheduled for a 2022 release, so if you want to play these games for the first time, I would probably recommend buying this collection. Anyway, see you guys later.